Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn with more on China's latest provocation, this one in the seas. Eric?
Yeah, hello, John. Well, China poking at the U.S. with these provocative actions, raising warnings in Washington about Beijing's escalating aggression. There is that Chinese warship intercepted a U.S.-guided missile destroyer in the Taiwan Strait on Saturday. As you can see, it crossed dangerously close across the bow. The alarming maneuver happened just days after this, a Chinese fighter jet crossing the path of a U.S. surveillance plane, causing it to shake from that warplane's wake turbulence. Or Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher, chair of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, says these brazen stunts are part of China's strategic efforts to undermine and challenge American presence in the Pacific. He charges the Biden administration simply is not doing enough about that. He says the White House needs to, for example, increase our military presence in the region, increase arms sales to Taiwan, including anti-ship missiles, and cut some economic ties so Beijing finally gets the message.
They're not interested in being friends. They're not interested in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. They are increasingly aggressive, revisionist power bent on displacing us as the dominant power in the Pacific and, I believe, globally.
Later today, Gallagher's committee is marking the 34th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. That happened yesterday. 34 years ago, in 1989, when those regime troops opened fire on the student demonstrators demanding democracy in their country, as you said, killing hundreds, if not thousands. The committee will also hold an event with these Chinese activists later today, including veterans of that protest who say the regime's crackdowns on freedom have only in the past decades gotten worse. The Chinese officials also happen to turn down a meeting with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, but we're told that CIA Director William Burns reportedly did make a secret trip to Beijing last month to try and lower tensions. But, John, it seems by judging by China's recent actions, Burns' visit may have failed to achieve that goal. John?
Increasingly provocative Eric Shawn for us in New York. Eric, thank you. Republican Congresswoman Cammack of Florida, member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, is here with us now. Is this China, Congresswoman Cammack, telling the U.S. to get out of our neighborhood?
Well, it's good to see you. Happy Monday. And yes, this is China's attempt to normalize this type of behavior. When you turn to Twitter this morning, you see the Politburo pushing out all of this propaganda talking about United States as a dying empire and how they were letting us know that we were in their neighborhood. Phone ops, freedom of navigation operations, which was what we were doing in the Taiwan Strait, have been used for years. But what China is trying to do is normalize this behavior. We on the American side need to continue to have a robust military presence, continue to make sure that that freedom of navigation operations continue in the region, because one, there's economic implications, but also this type of behavior is for China to be continuing to put that out there so that they can say, well, we've been doing this. They're just pushing the envelope a little bit more each time to make it normal. It's not. We need to stand firm. We need to put a word out that this will not be tolerated. And as our United States Navy said, it was unsafe operations. We have to be vocal and we have to push back now.
Yeah, when ships that are 500 feet long come that close to each other, yeah. I mean, that's almost a collision. Here's the way the Wall Street Journal editorial board saw it. Quote, China's clear military goal is to push the U.S. out of the Western Pacific, and it is getting bolder as its military power rapidly increases. Mr. Xi warned Chinese national security officials last week that they should prepare for the worst-case scenario and stormy seas. It almost looks like the Chinese are trying to provoke a confrontation here, Congresswoman.
Absolutely. This is the straight out of the Russia playbook, trying to establish a pretext to justify any hostilities in the region. As I said, we're in there and conducting freedom of navigation operations. There's no hostilities on our part. But what China wants to do is provoke a reaction to say that they were the victim, so that when they in turn engage, they feel justified, that they have the narrative on their side. It'll look no further than what they're doing around the world with their Belt Road Initiative. They go and they do these predatory lending schemes to say, we're coming in to do help, we're coming in to do humanitarian aid, when in reality, they're trying to trap countries into being beholden to the CCP. This is their playbook 101. We have to stand firm, take a stance. And I'm telling you, I'm very disappointed in Biden not speaking out about this as of yet. We need to make sure that Congress as a whole is standing strong. Republican, Democrat, we have to be Americans in this when it comes to this issue.
So standing strong is a big issue, particularly after President Biden fell on his face the other day at the Air Force Academy of all places. Here's the way Nikki Haley saw that this morning.
It is very clear. None of us should have celebrated when he fell. That was a horrific thing to have to watch. But what bothers me the most, Steve, is China and Russia and Iran saw that. That's the part that bothers me the most, because when they see weakness like that, that's when they go and get more aggressive.
So what message do you think that sends? I mean, obviously he tripped over a sandbag, but we have an 80-year-old president who's getting more stiff. He falls a number of times. One of these days, you never know, he could break a hip and not get back up. When President Xi takes a look at what's going on here in terms of our leadership, what's he thinking?
Well, again, I agree with what Ambassador Haley said. You know, she said that this type of behavior, this weakness, it invites aggression, and she's right. You know, no one should be cheering when they see the president stumbling on stage. No one should. But the fact remains is that he has been shaking hands with invisible people. He has been taking cues from the Easter Bunny. This type of weakness invites aggression from adversaries. Russia and China are watching this extraordinarily closely. When you look abroad at the propaganda machines, they're in full effect, talking about how America is in decline. That invites opportunities for them to take action economically and militarily against the United States.
I want to bring you over to this issue, if we could, Congresswoman. President Biden's reported pick for the new Centers for Disease Control director already is in hot water. Video resurfacing of Mandy Cohen laughing about how state officials collaborated on COVID restrictions while she served as North Carolina's health secretary. Listen to this.
Probably the person I called most was the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Massachusetts. She was like, "Are you going to let them have professional football?" And I was like, "Nope." And she's like, "Okay, neither are we. You know, it was like conversations like that. So, or I'd be like, "So when are you going to think about lightening up a mess?" They're like, "Next Monday." I'm like, "Okay, next Monday."
An op-ed puts it plainly, Cohen embodies the worst of pandemic policy. How were you struck by that exchange, Congresswoman, laughing about the idea that, well, if you're going to do this, we're going to do the same thing as well?
It's disgusting. There is nothing funny about the COVID lockdowns that destroyed people's businesses, destroyed livelihoods, harmed kids, harmed communities. There's nothing funny about it. So to have the nominee for the CDC sitting there laughing hysterically about this, it's not funny, it's not cute, and it again speaks to the lack of seriousness that this administration has when it comes to the very basics. When we have less than 50% of Americans today who have faith and confidence in the CDC of all agencies, that speaks volumes that you have someone who has very little regard for the science or the data that showed that lockdowns were ineffective. It has very little regard for the fact that we as Americans, we saw how destructive they were in states like California and New York that promoted the lockdowns. It's unacceptable, and the CDC should be focusing on trying to rebuild the trust of the American people rather than further erode it.
All right, well, we'll see how that nomination goes. We'll keep following it. Congresswoman Cammack of the great state of Florida, good to see you. Thanks for kicking us off today. Appreciate it. All right.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.